Howdy soldiers. My pixie cut is just long enough to put the top up, so I feel like this is going to be my new summer style. Also, I'm feeling citrusy today. I forgot I even owned this shirt and like, it's so good. Oh, this video has to be on hold for a second. I hear the UPS truck. Oh, the UPS truck was not for me. Please, sir, deliver fine goods. I want the things that I ordered. Please deliver to me. I've ordered so many books and none of them are here yet. All the shipping delays, and every time I see the truck go around my neighborhood, I get so sad. It's like a reverse Hunger Games where like you're hoping that it's gonna be you that they decide to visit. Well, I am not the chosen one today. It's fine, we'll move on with the video. So don't lie, how many times have you been reading a book where you're like, why are you focusing on this character? They are so boring. Why can't we listen to that guy? Like, what's he doing? How did he get here? I find this happens mostly with books with larger casts where the author will pay more attention to certain ones and then some people are way more developed than others. And sometimes even if they are well developed, I still want to know so much more about certain characters that usually aren't the main character. Maybe it's because you're in the head of the main character most often, so you are more in tune with what they're thinking or something. And I like a little mystery as much as the next girl does, but at the same time I'm like, why do I want to read about a person who is the personification of the color beige when this other character is maybe way more interesting, has such a cool backstory, and we hardly get to scrape the surface of it because we're in the main character's boring head for the entire novel. So I put together a short list of a bunch of side characters who really deserve their own book. The character from the book that started this whole video idea was Rune. It can't be Run, can it? From Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. So I hate this book, but I can't find my receipt, so I can't return it. So unfortunately, it's just sitting on my shelf with a bunch of boring-ass characters who I couldn't care less about, except for Rune? How do you say your name, dude? Rune is the brother of the main character, and he does get a couple of chapters here and there, and he is fairly integrated into the novel, especially near the end. But his backstory is so much more interesting than our whiny main character. He is a rebel, punk rock, fairy prince chosen one with a magic sword with tattoo sleeves and a half-shaved head and beautiful long flowy silver hair. My dude, where is a book about him? All we know about him when we meet him is that he is the estranged brother of our main character, so he just doesn't really talk to him, and he's had a bad childhood because daddy didn't love him. He's been labeled the chosen one by this magic sword, who apparently has chosen one choosing powers, but he has really weak star power and he really likes getting high. So I'll put that all together. He seems like such a cool character. We get to see him and some of his friends interact, and then we get to see how much he actually cares for the main character, even though she hasn't talked to him in decades. We see him trying to undermine his father and be like a good prince that can lead his people and work with other magical creatures who maybe in the past the Fae have kind of like held a prejudice against. So all of that, coupled with the fact that in this world there are specific fairy queens and kings and special fairy gods, there was so much potential for this to be so bombastic. And don't get me started on why I hated this book. I would much rather have a whole series of him rather than the two main characters in this book who just like snark and whine at each other and they're like trying to be sexy but just end up being gross. Second book on this list goes to a character that we do know a good amount about, but I would love to see more, and that is Evangelii from Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. When we first meet her, she is another competitor in the Queen's trial, and she and her family have the power to manipulate metal, so she's constantly walking around in these haute couture, elaborate ball gowns completely made of metal that she can just peel off of her body with her magic and make into spears and bullets and swords, and I'm like, oh, bad bitch alert! She and her family are set up to be antagonists in this, and we do sort of join forces, forgive each other, sort of kind of ish, have to work together for like the greater good type of thing in later books. But at the very end, we really just see her in one of those like, and she rode away on a train and we never saw her again, but I hope she's doing well. And I'm like, that's it? That's all you're gonna give this badass metal-wielding lady? Especially since Evangelii and her brother, whose name I don't remember, come from such a competitive and harsh family. I would love to see her growing up with that in this world of reds and silvers where you see the silver side rather than Mare growing up in the reds. Evangelii's been training her whole life to be queen and to win over Cal, and they've been friends for a long time, and she's practiced being ruthless and a leader. Plus I know that she and her brother have like an actually pretty good relationship, and they're like actually like they love each other despite all that. Even if I could see Evangeline's point of view throughout the war and maybe even a little bit afterward, like if Victoria Aveyard pulled a Midnight Sun with Evangeline, I wouldn't be mad at it. Next up is a bit of a weird character, I will admit, to choose for this list type video. But the next one up is Death from In 27 Days by Alison Gervais. This is the book I read on Wattpad forever ago, and it got turned into a book, and it was so very exciting. And the premise is that a girl finds out that a boy in her school has committed suicide, and she strikes a deal with Death to go back in time 27 days to stop him from dying. Because this is her story, we only see from her perspective, and Death tends to like pop up now and then and like have a chat. Not only does Death have a backstory, but these other weird creatures have a backstory, which are like opposing Death. They're like not angels, they're like kind of demons, I don't know, they're like a whole other being. And we get to find out that Death had a love that died, and we get to find out that that was like one of the reasons that he became Death. So how does this work? This brings up so many questions. What is Death? How do you become Death? Like, did you apply to become Death? Is it like a company turnover thing? Like, do you think they get a good retirement plan? But talking to the other being, Havoc, we see that he has his own history with Death. So that means that Death's been around a long time, and they have history together, and Death has done this reverse time thing more than once. So what does this mean as Death as a character? Like, he's obviously a troublemaker, but would you, or the heavenly body, or the existential gods, would they allow Death to just kind of like fuck around a bunch with mortal lives? Like, how does this work? And I'm so intrigued because this means that he has a backstory with multiple people over multiple years, or maybe centuries. And because we get to see him a little bit in the like epilogue future, that means that he's like still messing with people and he's still in contact with people. So like, he seems really cool. I would love to have a book about him mentioning how he's losing his mortality, and due to that he's losing morality, and the lines of life and death and like what's important are blurring. That would be so cool. Alison Gervais, get on it, girl. So the reason I'm mentioning the character in this next book, which is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, is because I haven't read Aurora Burning yet, because the UPS guy doesn't want to deliver my freaking package. But regardless, having just read this book, I would love to learn more about Cal. We get the space adventure with the ragtag band of heroes and like 6 misfits that all come together to form a team, and Cal is the like 6-foot something, blonde hair, Elrond type of elven alien who is sort of the love interest to our other character Aurora, and I love what they did with his character. First of all, he's very stoic and serious and doesn't really get sarcasm and is very protective of things, and I love those kinds of characters. But when we first meet him, we find that he's like bonded to Aurora. Their species of alien have a soulmate, and usually it's of their own race, but this time it's of someone who's not his race, and he's very confused. But he doesn't tell her this until much later in the book, and even when he does tell her, he's like, hey, this is what's happening, I'm weirded out by it, I'm sure you're weirded out by it, I'm not gonna pressure you. I will like leave the ship, I will go on my own adventure, and you don't ever have to see me again. And that was amazing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this, a soulmate who doesn't want his soulmate and respects the autonomy and asks consent from his soulmate? Cal is one of the more underdeveloped characters, and we get so little of him in this book, but every time I love reading him, and I would love to see his life on his home planet, and we sort of get to see him interact with a few people of his own race, but they're like evil, so they don't count. Even just more of his own thoughts when it comes to Aurora and what she means to him, and like what that means to him and his culture. I would love to read about just, I mean, I love elves, and I like space. So like elves in space, plus consent, plus like hot man. Yes, please, sign me up for that. And lastly is also a bit of a cheat, because I just want so much more, even though there is like a good amount of them already. Anyways, that is Maura, Calla, and Persephone from the Raven Boys series by Maggie Stiefvater. All my friends that love this book love these witchy women, and I am no exception. I love their trio, and I love the way that they are so integrated into the series, and they're there as mentors and rule makers and guides, and I just love that they have their own dynamic and they're real people and they're allowed to be older women in a YA book. And I love their story so much. I love that they're clairvoyant, the way that they see things, and the way that those visions impact other things that their teens are doing. And in one of the later books we get a very short scene of how they all met each other, but I'm like, but what happens after that? Did you guys go get burgers? Did you do a seance like right then and there? I would love to see younger versions of these characters, because it is the choices they made when they were younger that led to good part of the whole Raven cycle. Like, it led to Blue, and it led to the curse, and it led to why they settled in the place that they did. And I would love to see the beginnings of their magic and their friendship. So, oh my gosh, I know that a lot of people don't like it when authors write constantly in the same world, but I will read anything Maggie Stiefvater writes, and I will read anything Maggie Stiefvater writes in the Raven Boys world. I want it all. So there you have it. There are a list of side characters that I would love to see get their own books. Please leave down below if you have your own, because these are only the ones I can think about, but I'm sure there are many more. It's very hard to juggle a large cast of characters to make sure that they all get the development they deserve, so it often tends that if there's more than like 3, there's gonna be some characters left behind in the dust. And sometimes I care about those characters, and a lot of the times I don't. Sometimes you're talking to a new person and you learn something real wild about them that you're like, I'm sorry, you did what when you were younger? Or, oh, wow, you had this thing? Please tell me more. And then like 3 hours later, I'm like, this is the most interesting person I have ever met in my entire life. I guess that's something else you can leave down below. Leave down below something weird or wild that you've done or participated in that if you told someone else, they'd be like, whoa. I need that story. Like for me, the first week and a half that I ever spent in Milan on a modeling contract, my friends and I had a week that, when I say it back, sounds like something that not even a soap opera would pick up because they would think it was too outlandish. You know where to click to like the video, you know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!